Welcome to Small Practice Support Information Session 6. In this Law Society of Ireland recording, Solicitor Anne O'Connell talks to Justin Purcell about employment challenges post-Covid-19.
So you're all very welcome to Employment Challenges Post-Covid-19 with Anne O'Connell. I'm delighted to have on the call with me today Anne O'Connell, who has over 19 years employment law experience, and she formed her own specialist employment law firm in 2017. And I'm delighted she was able to tell me just there a few minutes ago she was won an award there for Women in Law by Lawyer Monthly in the category of employment law. So obviously we've got one of the best speakers in Ireland here talking to us today. So I'm really privileged and pleased to have that. So Anne, you're very welcome. You're a member of the Law Society's Employment Law Committee and the Employment Law Association of Ireland. So we're in good hands. So how are you getting on there, Anne?
Good, thanks a million, Justin, for that lovely introduction. I'm going red now under this makeup.
Not at all. So it's great to have you with us today. So I'll just so my slides have just got a bit nutty. So today we're going to just have a general chat around some of the post-COVID employment challenges that employers have faced, and some of the stories that experiences that you've encountered, and some of the practicalities of reopening the workplace. So it's less about how we're going to open up now and more about what's happened since we've opened up and what are some of the considerations as employers or solicitors that we should be aware of. So how are you finding it out there, Anne, at the moment?
Yeah, it's very strange. It is very different. People are taking very different approaches to it. I have our team back in the office since the 29th of June. And it was very different from advising clients in relation to returning to work to actually getting down and doing the return to work policy myself and setting out the whole policy for our firm and actually doing it, the practicalities of doing it. And so it is something that I find some people particularly those who have been in towns or in Dublin, are sort of more aware of the social distancing and the obvious aspects to practice, when those who are coming back from the countryside are not so actually familiar. They can be a bit overwhelmed coming back into the office, and you've got to just be more appreciative of that, which I had to discuss even that occurred with our own team, like that they weren't so aware, and then they were coming back into Dublin and it was all a little bit overwhelming for them. So it had to be a gradual getting back to it and to be getting used to, that other people don't necessarily respect the social distancing coming to and from work, and not to have the fear factor as well. Like, it was very new for them. So I think that it's all about stating the obvious to the team and looking at the protocol. The safety and return to work protocol is a terribly drafted document. It's very repetitive and it doesn't distinguish what the mandatory, like, you need to go through it and actually identify what is actually the mandatory requirements as opposed to the recommendations and the idealistic requirements. So if you just start with the mandatory requirements that are in it, which is said you must, everything that says you must, go through them and make sure you have it. And they're obvious. They're like, put up the signs, make sure that you can have the distance, and if you can't, put up the prospectus, the plastic dividers, and make sure you appoint a representative, and that you have the information, the form filled out by each of your employees before they come back, that you have a designated area if somebody is suspected, and that you have updated your safety statement accordingly. So there's a number of practical issues, I found the HSA website, if you go into the HSA website, there are a number of templates, but actually I would just go straight to the control measure template. The others are just repetitive and they're over the top. So just go to the control measure one, go through, that is actually a checklist. So if you go through that and write your document from that, and then you will have covered most of everything else. And then what I would go from there is I would go to the website nsai.ie, which actually has a much more practical checklist than the HSA website. And that is really of assistance. I find that much more helpful in setting out your policy rather than the actual HSA. The HSA have to, go overboard. Have to go overboard. Sorry, I'm getting this poll up in front of me. Have to go overboard then the others. And I think that some of the checklists on the HSA are very, very helpful, but most of them are a bit overwhelming, and you end up just stopping and not doing it at all. So you're better off just to get the mandatory ones, and then you'll see, okay, well, if I follow the mandatory provisions, how is that going to change my process, and what do I need to change? And then you need to work around the mandatory and then see, can you bring in the recommended provisions after that? So that's the way I would approach it. And if you're in the serviced office like we are, you need to make sure that the service providers that they're complying with the obligations as well, and that they have everything in order, and that they should actually be providing the designated area, and that they have a contact person as well. Like, I know this is a challenge for small firms having a designated area, and before I got informed that actually they are providing a room, or my designated area was in the shelter outside in the car park. So they're waiting for a taxi. So, I mean, that is what you're going to have to look at, because in small offices, you don't have the luxury of having an office, a separate space. So there is impracticalities that the HSA haven't thought of. So you've just got to do the best you can. And just be aware the HSA are carrying out inspections. Up to the 2nd of June, they'd already carried out over 800 inspections just based on the return to work protocol. So they are carrying out these inspections. They are saying it's initially as a collaborative approach, but it's just get it done rather than having another headache, because another approach can be a disgruntled employee looking for another angle to come at you at, and that's not what you want.
Yeah. Are there any particular issues that are coming up out of those inspections that people are complying with, that they're particularly focusing on?
I haven't heard much. I haven't heard much feedback. It's very much having the obvious and the simple steps carried out, like having the signs up, having the hand sanitizers there, and having having it showing that you actually have made efforts, that you have actually got the questionnaires filled out and you've got proof of the training to your staff. Like, one actually tip that I got from a friend who works in a construction PLC company, where they're obviously over the top in relation to compliance, which they have to be, is like, for offices, we're always sharing staplers, we're always sharing, staplers or pens, we're rushing out the door, we're throwing them into our briefcases for going down to court. And she said, and I've implemented here, we literally have lunch boxes, and we have put everything, each one of us have a different color lunchbox, and we have all our pens and stuff, so you cannot use anybody else's pen. And it's a change of mindset. You're like, no, don't pick up that. And you have the stapler and the hole punch and everything is all in that lunchbox, and you bring it downstairs for the photocopier with you, if you need anything, and put everything back in that lunchbox. And you've got to stop. If you have a shared briefcase, you can't just be throwing pens into it anymore. You either put it in your seat pocket or your handbag, and they're your pens and they go back into your lunchbox. So it's those little changes that need to be done. And I know in bigger firms, which can also be an issue for smaller firms, is the space. So if you don't have the space and you don't want to put up the plastic dividers between the desks, then the other option is you have rotations, or you have certain employees working from home. So you can have them working from home on alternative days. So that's another thing that is working for, is particularly where you've got employees who are working with, who are living with people that are more on the,
more vulnerable. Or,
more vulnerable. That you might have them working from home, and then they might come in on alternative days, or they might come in at the weekend to do something that they need the office to, or they might come in at different hours. So, or where they have small children. So you have them working different hours. And the key thing is, well, they mightn't be working the same hours. So you need to make sure that you're recording their hours, so you're not breaching the Organisation Working Time Act. So you have to download an app. So I have one of my team has a small child, and she might work all different hours. So we have apps which are very useful, and she just records the hours and records her breaks. And then you're compliant, and you're also making sure that she's not working over the time. She has to keep checking that and emails it in, and it's very useful. And the other thing that which I'm getting into remote working, but we will address that. Sure. That is, it's sort of like they just need to be really, really mindful about that where people, it's just, we're a different work, we've got to work in a different way. So where people are returning to work, and some people actually are looking for it to be the same as it is, and it's not, and you've got to appreciate that, and and gradually bring the staff back in and on board with the changes that have to be made.
Yeah, I know there was something we were going to talk about, working hours and breaks, and how the employer meets their obligations on remote workers. How is that? Is that managed using this app that you're talking about? Or?
It is.
And how micro does the employer need to be in managing that? Like, do they need to be seeing timesheets every day, or?
No, every week, and it should be that this the one we use, I think, is Working Time. It's Working Time app. I can send you the link to it, because there's a lot of those apps that you have to have a number of employees, and our team is just 5, so it works for us perfectly. It's not expensive, and the employee could just emails me their timesheet then. And if they haven't, I'm on to them on a weekly basis, if because it is quite embarrassing if the WRC does an inspection on our firm as employment law, and we're not compliant. So, but it's also some employees and some of the team will feel guilty from working from home. They feel like, because I'm working from home, they think I'm not doing anything. And then on the other side, some people won't be doing stuff at home. They're not as productive or not as motivated. So, you've got to see, there is that element too. So you've got to see, right, well, if you're working these hours, what are you doing? Is it different hours suits you? Are you more productive? If you don't have to be working all of the hours during the day, is there other hours that are more productive? We're seeing, we're now getting emails from the WRC and late at night. So they're obviously working different hours because they're working remotely. So it's it's bizarre. But also employers need to be very mindful of the case of 2018, the KeyPack case, where it said, where a lady in the Labour Court got awarded 7,500 because she was able to she proved that she was working over 48 hours by the fact that she was receiving emails after hours. So she didn't even need to show that she was responding or there was a requirement to respond. Just the fact that she was receiving emails after hours. So in order to combat that, there needs to be some type of email understanding that if particularly like if one of your team has a child, so she will be working different hours than 9 to half 5, that there's an acknowledgement, or there's acknowledgement that you will either be sending emails, but you don't expect her to review them until her working hours. And even on the email, you know, I don't expect you to read this or respond to this until you're working. You know, those steps.
Does that need to be documented, or can it be a verbal kind of understanding?
I always say it's better to actually document it if possible. And even if it's just on the bottom of the email or on the top of in the subject matter, you know, don't read until you're working, or don't read until, you know, it's more thinking about when things go wrong. I know this sounds over the top, but when things go wrong, it goes wrong really quickly between employer and employee. It's like it's often compared to marriage, although like I've never been married, so I don't know that. But the relationship goes down actually quicker. Like it goes sour. When it goes sour fairly dramatically, and the employee looks at everything they can get you on. And so you need to think about, well, I need to be able to prove that I didn't expect them. So the only way you can prove it is actually in writing.
So here's a question there from Moira, just about when somebody shows symptoms at work, what's the responsibility of the employer to assist that person to get home if they can't take public transport? Is it that a taxi is provided, or like?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the first things that I thought was crazy in the protocol, that they made this requirement but didn't specify what was the alternative. And what is required to do is that what's recommended is you actually either contact somebody from their household to come and collect them, or you get them a taxi home, or to their GP. So it's one or the other. And the requirement is that you have your representative in the firm, that representative, you provide them with a mask to put on immediately. You remove them from the room, the building, to either a designated area away from the other employees. Your representative stays with them, although a distance. Your representative puts on a mask as well, and you wait for the taxi to come, or the person who's collecting them from their household. You also should ask them to, would they share if they've got the app. You should actually, that is something that should be in a policy, that you should require all of your staff to have the tracking app, and that that they contact their GP, and that would they share their app with the HSE while they're on their way.
And just as a follow-on to that, a question there from Hilary is that if they have symptoms and are subsequently tested positive, what are the implications for the firm? Does the whole office have to shut down for 14 days, or what happens if they don't have symptoms, or like?
No, so if they test positive, you contact, they contacted the HSE, and then you should all get tested. So everybody that was in the room or in contact with that person should get tested in any event. And all their area needs to be disinfected, and not to touch, like disinfected to the extent you can, but not to touch any of her or his area for a period. I think they say it's is it at least it's over 48 hours, or so not touch the area, and then after that just disinfect everything in that area. And
the office can reopen then as no?
Yeah, the office can continue. Yeah, the office shouldn't require a shutdown.
So a deep cleanse, and the people who are in her proximity or his proximity would be go for a coronavirus test, and the HSE would be informed.
Yeah, and the HSE will probably have contacted
the HSE.
to say to go, because they will come up on their tracking.
Yeah, very good. So I know we're moving on, and it's 20 minutes in. So just to give us an idea, so a little bit of, we have a lot to cover. So I'm not sure we're going to cover it all today, but we'll just kind of work through the issues. What about reluctant returners to the workplace? People are, struggling to return for a variety of issues. One, healthcare, childcare, traffic, transport issues.
Yeah, that is a real challenge that a number of my clients, as well as friends, are actually coming across. It is also coming across where they're receiving more by not being working than they are by coming back to work. And so there's different issues on that. If they are receiving more from being laid off, then coming back to work, well, then you can actually notify the department that they have been requested, and then they don't qualify. So that's the ultimate step you can take. The other, if they are just afraid, what you do, if there's concerns, you try and address those concerns. So what you try and say is, here's a protocol, here's everything, there shouldn't be concern, driving to work, public transport now, it's mandatory to wear face masks, so that should address a lot of people's concerns and fears, and just think of other ways of getting to and from work, and to show all the practices that have been put in place. If then they've childcare, they need to see what can they do to arrange the childcare, and working around that if you can, with their partner, or if they have a partner, and with other relatives, and see can they work remotely from home to facilitate those with children who can't manage to get childcare, and working from home on certain days and sharing the time with the children. So it's first trying to work together with the employee to see is there some way arrangements that can be made, where you'll get people that actually just have this illogical fear, or they just don't want to, they just like being at home, and there is no actual valid reason for them not coming into work. Well, then ultimately you'll be issuing the disciplinary policy. So, and you'll be warning them that this is a reasonable instruction, and their failure to comply with the reasonable instruction will have to result in the disciplinary process being initiated.
Are there any changes to the disciplinary process or investigation procedures?
Yeah, it's going to be, well, yes, in fact that they're going to be done remotely.
Yeah.
So that is the change in the disciplinary process, and also to make sure that they're not recording them. Like every employer now, where they're doing remote disciplinary process, I mean, redundancies are being done remotely now as well. So where they're doing disciplinary process remotely, they should really assume that they're being recorded, although they should actually say, look, you're not permitted to record, or you are permitted to record. It is their data, it is about them. So technically I would argue that they could record it, but your voice and your face is your personal data, so you can have a right to object to it.
Okay, and I know moving forward and moving on to the sort of August 10th, there's a change with regards to the Temporary Wage Subsidy Scheme and the Redundancy Act, etc. I might just launch a poll on that, but do you want to comment on that while I do that?
Yeah. So you've got to be very aware of the 10th of August coming up, because if you have a staff that are still laid off and haven't come back yet, and you actually either you're like, oh, we're going to wait and see, you're not in a position to decide whether or not you actually are going to have them made redundant, or whether you can bring them back yet. What you need to do is be aware that from the 10th of August, any employee that's been laid off can actually seek to claim redundancy payment, and that's the statutory redundancy payment. So so you need to be just aware that they can implement that immediately. They don't have to wait another 4 weeks. So because during the pandemic, the government put a pause on that. They amended the legislation that the employees couldn't. So it's either if they're on short time, which is 50% less hours, or at least 50% less hours of work, or they're laid off. So if they're on the wage subsidy scheme, they can't claim it because they're still on your payroll. This is actually where they're technically laid off. So they are actually on the unemployment, on the COVID unemployment payment scheme, rather than on the wage subsidy scheme. So if they're on the wage subsidy scheme, I don't think they qualify for the layoff, even if they're not at work, because they are still on your salary and on your payroll. So they would have to be off your payroll for 4 weeks or more for them to claim redundancy. But they still might try because there isn't clear communication out there on that yet. So yeah, I think a lot of employers aren't aware that they need to get their act together before the 10th of August, because employees will be looking for this money and then could change firm, move to another firm, and with a package of the tax-free package from the statutory redundancy, and you may not be in a position to make that tax-free package as yet.
Yeah, very good. And if anybody out there has a question, I know we're coming to the sort of the end of our scheduled time. So if anybody wants to ask Anne a question, we'd be happy to take it. And do you see any other kind of major issues that we should be aware of at this stage? Or
I think
know GDPR is yeah.
I think home working is something that people now need to relook at. I think because like it was very temporary measures at the start, it's now becoming more permanent, or definitely more long term for a lot of staff. I think that you need to look at GDPR. You need to change your policy and say, okay, if you've got or you've printed out certain documents, you need to, have agreement that they're kept in confidential place, that calls can't be overheard where they're working from home. That, I mean, you really should put in a working at home policy, and that their computers, that their access to work, that nobody else can access their work, their work if they're and should really not use that laptop, or there should be security that they can't get into any of their work emails or their work data, because even if it's by mistake, they might recognize a name, and then that's how rumors start. And then you've got GDPR issues, you've got confidentiality issues, you could be disciplined from the Law Society. It's a whole big nightmare just waiting to happen. So you also need to look at different types of signatures. So DocuSign is one, how to sign different stuff. And also that's happening as well with your terms of engagement, as to how you get clients to accept terms of engagement. They don't have printers either. So you've got to provide for acceptance by way of email. And then the other is, some people say about the home insurance. Are they insured to working at home? So is it covered? They need to make sure it's covered. You also need to look at expenses. Can you afford to pay the $350 per day tax-free towards their expenses? Or are you asking employees at the end of the year to keep all their bills and seek a payment from revenue at the end of the year? And then the timing, the working time, and just acknowledge the different hours that people work at, and also try and have, the key thing is health and safety. I've come across now at least 2 cases where the employees have a mental need to be in the workplace. So accommodation actually not only is to facilitate people working from home, but where their mental health requires them to be in a workplace and have that routine, you actually need to try and provide for that. So it is more actual common than I would have ever thought before this. It doesn't mean they're not able to do their job. It's just something that they require for their own condition. And it's a matter of managing that from also a privacy point of view also. But it is a different way of working. It is manageable. HSA on remote working, from a risk assessment, their questionnaire is very good. You can, once you get the employee to review that, at the moment, that seems sufficient. But the key thing in relation to remote working is communication. Keep them involved, keep those who are working remotely involved in what's going on in the office, and keep communicating with them and training them, and keep them in team meetings remotely via Zoom or Teams or whatever app you have. So I think it's re-looking and keep revisiting. Another thing that is coming up for us that we find is on the wage subsidy scheme, ask your accountant, do you still qualify? Because if you haven't revisited it, you could end up that you'll be paying back the revenue money, which is the last thing you need. So when clients start to pay you again, just have it recheck, are you still qualifying for the wage subsidy scheme? So it is something to have a look at. I think if there's any other...
I think that's it, and I think that's really great. That's been a really, really fantastic half an hour. Lots of great positive feedback coming in on the chat. I think it's really clear why you won the award, and you've got a really competent understanding. So Women in Law by the Lawyer Monthly, so category in employment law. So congratulations again, Anne. Listen, thanks a million for spending time with us today. It's been great. Hopefully we'll have you back again sometime in the future.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, Anne. Thank you. Bye.